Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Tcg Sam here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 9 decks that get support from the new Battles of Legends Monster Mayhem set. At the time of recording, at least, I guess the Magus stuff isn't confirmed, so there's a chance we don't get them, but the other ones should be in this set. In this video, I'm only going to be talking about the decks that get new support from this set. I'll do a more complete tier list of all the best decks once the Duelist Advanced set comes out, because that comes out not too much later after this. So, in today's video, I'm going to cover which decks get support from the newest Battles of Legends set, and how I think they'll fare into the current metagame. Starting with Gem Knight. So Gem Knight gets, I think, quite a few new, pretty broken cards, to be honest. Like, the monster pictured here, it's like a Gem Knight Hollow or something like that. It's essentially like a Mathmech Circular for the deck. You can special summon it as an extender from the hand by dumping a Gem Knight monster or a Gem Knight fusion to the graveyard. And then it also gives the deck a way to play around a hand trap like Nibiru, since once it hits the graveyard and you have a fusion monster on the field, you're able to negate pretty much anything. Not to mention, they also get, quite frankly, a pretty broken new spell and a new level 4 monster as well. I think the new support makes it so this deck is very good at generating a ton of bodies out onto the board. And as far as I know, like, most of the cards will not lock you. So I think the most common version of Gem Knight you're probably going to see is like the Featsmith version, just because of how good this deck is, just putting up random bodies on the board, spamming out their fusion monsters, and then just getting like the Gem Knight Hollows to the graveyard as an extra negation to insulate yourself against those hand traps like Nibiru. So overall, I think that while the support cards are very good, even by today's standards, I do feel like overall this deck sort of just feels like a combo Featsmith deck that you can argue is maybe better, maybe worse than something like Evil Twin Featsmith right now, which is the other combo Featsmith variant that we have in the format at the moment. There are definitely advantages and disadvantages to playing the Gem Knight engine over something like Evil Twin Featsmith, for example. I think in general, like, these fusion types decks are maybe a little bit more clunky because you do need a fusion outlet, like a fusion spell or a monster that lets you fusion summon. That makes it so your opponent knows pretty much exactly what to stop against this deck. If they cut off the fusion outlets, this deck isn't able to generate nearly as many bodies as something like Evil Twin Featsmith can. So overall, I think that this is still going to be a decent deck. The cards are very powerful. I'll put it in the topping regionals tier. I think it can do pretty well at regionals. I'm not too sure it'll be able to consistently compete with the best of the best at a big event like a YCS or a Nationals. Alright, next up is Drak. So Drak also gets some pretty, quite frankly, broken cards in this set. Like, there's a monster that, like, foolishes a dinosaur and then just summons out like 2 or 3 dinosaurs from the deck. It reads really broken when you first look at it. My biggest problem with this deck is that just the old cards that are in this archetype are just so bad. I can't think of any old Drak card that is actually something you really want to play in a modern day Drak deck. So overall, I think that Drak will probably be seen as an engine in something like the dinosaur deck, and it'll definitely raise the ceiling of that deck a ton. While the new support cards are very good, the old cards kind of just hold this deck back a little bit. Like, I'll put it at maybe the top of can do well at a local event. I don't really know if this deck will be good enough at a regional level because the dinosaur deck hasn't been seeing any results lately, and I'm not sure this new support, as powerful as it is, will be able to push dinosaurs further up into the metagame. So overall, I think this deck is probably something that's like fine for a local metagame. Like, it can be cool to like resolve some super powerful Drak effects and then wipe your opponent's board with like the Drak Meteor, but I just don't think this deck is consistent enough, and the card quality of like the cards outside of the support wave are just not nearly good enough to compete with today's metagame. Next up is Orcus, and Orcus is the first deck I'm going to put in Cantop YCS. I think this is probably going to be the best deck that gets support out of this set. The new Link 1 gives it a ton of potential with new 1-card combos, making it so the deck is a little bit more consistent now, as opposed to back in the day when you needed to get like 2 random bodies on the board to make like a Nightmare for Phoenix and then turn that into Nightmare Mermaid. Now, like, a lot of your normal summon Orcus monsters just become 1-card combos on their own, even something like Orcus Symbol Skeleton, which previously didn't do anything before. Now, I will say, even though I think this deck is the best one to get support out of all these decks, I do think this deck maybe will be like at the bottom end of like the top 10 decks in the current format. I don't really think it'll be any better than that. I think the biggest glaring issue is that, one, like, people are still playing Artifact Lancia for Malice, and this deck just gets caught in the crossfire really badly. Like, this deck is not really able to do anything under Lancia at all, and it'll kind of fall in the same boat as Malice, except unlike Malice, this deck doesn't really have like a backup at Ignister equivalent or something like that to help them play through a card like Lancia. So I think that Orcus will struggle a lot with Lancia. Not to mention, people are still playing cards like Bystials. The Bystials are obviously very good against the Orcus deck. Now, all that being said, though, this support is pretty much almost exactly what Orcus needed, I felt like, giving them more consistency and then making their end board like a little bit stronger in engine, because back in the day you would end on a card like IP Masquerena, which is cool, but it's not really a part of the main Orcus engine. Now they have a new link for some Snatch Steal a monster, and then it's an extra interruption in the graveyard as well when you link it off with IP Masquerena. So I think it makes the end board of Orcus a lot scarier, especially now that they can consistently get access to the counter trap as well as set up a Babel on the board as well. Whereas before, you kind of had to choose either or, since you only had Galatea as a way to get access to them. So overall, Orcus definitely, I think it's definitely going to be a very competitive deck. It can definitely do well at the YCS level, but it does suffer from some flaws in the fact that it is going to lose pretty hard to a card like Lancia and Bystials. Next up are DDDs, and I don't think the new support that DDDs get in this set are going to be nearly enough to make the deck do anything. Like, I think the deck is probably just going to be exactly where it was before we got the support, which is not relevant at all. Most of the cards probably aren't even going to see play in the DDD deck, and as you all are probably aware, the DDD deck hasn't done anything for quite a while now, and I don't think it will start doing anything now either. Next up is Necros. I think Necros is a very interesting one because two of their new cards are sort of just like a generic way to get bodies out onto the board. Like the new level 4 warrior monster, like on summon will just summon like Dance Priestess, and then Dance Priestess gets access to like a Necros spell or a Necros monster, and then you don't actually have to, I guess, do anything with the Necros side of the deck. You could, in theory, just like turn the two bodies into something like Fiendsmith. You could turn the two bodies into something like King of the Feral Imps to search Mitsurugi cards. Like, I think the Necros stuff will maybe see some experimentation being splashed with Mitsurugi, because it is a very consistent way to get access to rank 4s and extra bodies on the board, assuming you don't want to play like the Ryzo cards, of course, and you do want to play some Necros cards in your deck. You can make an argument that like sort of a ritual pile deck like Mitsurugi and Necros would work decently well, because the levels for the Necros cards do kind of work out with the Mitsurugi cards. I think there could be some level of synergy there. Overall, though, I think even though the new cards are really good, I don't feel like the old Necros cards are sort of good enough to really keep up with today's metagame. These older cards are definitely a lot better than like the Drak cards for sure, but I don't feel like the Necros deck is going to be able to do too much more than something at a local level. This one, like, I think maybe it can top a regionals, but for now I'm gonna put it at like the top of locals tier. It just sometimes feels like when you're playing a ritual deck, it can be a little bit clunky, especially if you don't have these super powerful ritual spells like Mitsurugi Ritual or super powerful engine pieces like Habakiri. As a pure deck, I don't think it'll do very well. Maybe Splash with Mitsurugi, it can do something. But for now, I think that even though the cards are good, it probably won't do anything more at a local level, in my opinion. Next up is the Punk deck, and I think the Punk deck probably, maybe, I want to say is like the second best deck to get support out of this set. Like, even though they only get like 2 new cards, those 2 new cards are very, very strong for the deck. They get a new extender that lets them essentially E-tally a guy out from the deck and just summons itself for essentially free from the hand. And that's something that's incredibly powerful, because it felt like before with the Punk deck, you were missing ways to get like those non-tuners out on the board outside of like a card like Deer Note. So now you have an extra 3 copies of a card that you want to actually summon out onto the board, and it gets you to more engine in the process. So I think that new level 8 extender is very good for the deck. They also get a very powerful new Xyz monster that they can cheat out just by slapping on top of one of their Punk monsters. And this Xyz monster essentially lets them play around a card like Nibiru, which I think was also one of the problems with the deck before. Like, I felt like the deck was pretty good at generating bodies, but it didn't really have a good way to prevent a card like Nibiru from just wiping out their entire board. So now that they get pretty much the 2 exact support pieces that they need, I feel like Punk as a deck is probably something that I'll put at like the very top of Can Top regionals. I don't know if it's just at the YCS level yet, because same thing as Gem Knight, like, yes, the cards are very powerful and are very good by today's standards, but I think overall they're probably going to be used in more of like a combo Fiendsmith context, because the Punk engine is of course very good at putting up like their own Punk interruptions, but you probably want cards like the Fiendsmith cards in your decks just to raise the ceiling of your deck a little bit more, so it's able to compete at the top level. Whereas if you just try to play like the pure Punk deck, I don't think it'll necessarily be good enough to compete in this current format. But if you are able to splash it with the Fiendsmith stuff, I think it'll be very strong. And I think overall, it'll probably follow in a similar boat as Gem Knight. Like, these are 2 new, I guess, combo Fiendsmith variants. While their own engines are very good, I think they need like the Fiendsmith engine in order to compete with the current metagame that we have. Next up are Fabled. I think Fabled, like, they do get some cool new cards, and the cards are also pretty decent by today's standards. Like, and I think that's a common trend you'll see with all these. Like, these new decks did get some pretty broken support by today's standards, but it just feels like the decks that they're supporting, like all the old cards in these archetypes, are just not good enough to really compete in this current format. And Fabled is kind of in that similar boat. Like, I would say the only thing that's keeping me from putting Fabled in like the buy tier is the fact that it is a Light Fiend deck, so they are going to be able to play the V-Smith engine pretty easily in their combos, but it suffers a similar problem as the Dirac deck in the sense that, yes, the new support is very powerful, and yes, it has some synergy with an existing archetype like V-Smith, but I don't think that the old cards are nearly as good enough to keep up with today's format. So all that is to say is, yeah, Fabled is pretty much in a similar boat as Dirac. Broken new support, but the old cards just can't really keep up, so I'll put it in the Cantop Locals tier. Next up is Dragon Maid, and Dragon Maid is interesting. They do get a few new cards, and they do get a new fusion monster in Ladies Dragon Maid. I think that the new Dragon Maid cards are like fine. Like the new support cards feel a little bit more toned down compared to like some of the other support cards that these other decks are getting. Like, yeah, the support is good, but they don't read nearly as broken as some of the other support cards that we've gotten for the other decks on this tier list. Overall, I think that maybe it'll help Dragon Maids like top of locals now, as opposed to just being completely irrelevant. Like the old Dragon Maid cards aren't bad by any means. Like Chamber Dragon Maid's pretty good. Dragon Maid Tidying is also pretty solid. Interruption and follow up. So overall, I think that the new Dragon Maid cards, while they're good enough by today's standards, I don't really think it'll be enough to push the deck into any meta relevance at all. And then finally, Magistus. I think that Magistus does get some pretty great new support in a card like Spoon. I think Magistus Spoon is almost like the perfect support card for the Magistus strategy, not only because it gives it extra consistency, but it also turns the old cards that used to not be so good into like one card combos now. And I think that the playstyle of the deck is actually pretty solid. Like none of the cards really lock you as far as I know, and that means you're able to like splash Magistus with a bunch of other stuff like either Fiendsmith or like play it as like a rank 4 toolbox. You could just play like pure Magistus as well, and the Magistus cards are really good. They do get a new fusion monster that sort of acts like a Therion King Regulus that can negate anything by sending something, and that helps it play around a card like Nibiru. So it does check a few of the boxes it needs to be a top contender in my opinion. I'm not too sure how people will choose to play this deck because I haven't really seen what people are really trying to do with this deck in the TCG. I think I've seen like people try to play as like combo slop with like Azamina cards, but I don't really think I like that kind of playstyle for the deck. I think maybe more of a mid-rangey style for the Magistus deck could work, and maybe there's some engine out there that you can use the Magistus engine to bridge into, like something like the Fiendsmith engine or the Ryzeal engine, because it is able to make rank 4s very easily. Overall, I think Magistus is a deck that can definitely top at the regionals level. The new support cards are pretty good by today's standards, and the playstyle of the deck is something that should be able to keep up fairly well with the power level of the decks that we have today. So I'll put Magistus in the Cantop regionals here. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section below. Do you agree or disagree? And do you think that any of these decks are actually better than I'm giving it credit for? Let me know in the comment section below. Before I end off the video, I just want to give a quick shout out to CardTrader. You can check them out using my affiliate link in the description below and help support the channel just by signing up with it. And then use code TCG Sam for 5% off your entire order. Once again, I will be doing more of a full best decks tier list once Duelist Advanced comes out, so do stay tuned for that. But with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.